Hi, my sweet strangelings. This is Steffany Strange, and we are here on Mystic Mondays, or welcome to Mystic Mondays. So I've had somebody ask me, why do we call it Metaphysical Mystic Mondays? And honestly, that's a great question. And it's basically just like the pursuit of spiritual truths through direct experience, intuition, and insight. So today we'll be discussing weird, odd, and unsolved cases with our special guest, who will also be sharing some paranormal experiences that she has had and also her amazing work. So I'm going to hand it off over to you, Kelsey.
Hi, I'm Kelsey, but everyone calls me the paranormal Sherlock Holmes. That is because I have a podcast called Haunted Detective, where we deep dive and investigate the macabre and spooky sides of things. And our whole goal is to make it so that everyone that listens needs to sleep with their lights on at night. And I know we've specifically succeeded with our editor because he'll be working on stuff and he's like, oh my God, this is so scary, Kelsey. I'm alone in my office. It's dark and I'm terrified right now. Why would you do this to me? So yeah, paranormal Sherlock Holmes.
I love that so much. Actually, side note, since you mentioned your editor, can I just ask you a quick question? Because
Yeah.
I met an editor for a TV show that I was on, and he acted right away like he knew everything about me. I'm like, whoa, who are you? Who are you? And he's like, oh, I'm the editor. I'm like, oh, so do you ever like feel like your editor feels like they're just like, but like vicariously or like this parasocial? I mean, I know you know them, but it's like feels kind of parasocial at times because you're like, wait, yo, yeah, you know that because you edited that.
Sometimes we'll just like drop the juiciest tea ever, but add in the episode like, hey, Chris, don't include this. This is too much tea. This is too rich. People need to pay good money for this drama right here. But he'll text me and be like, oh my God, that was crazy. That was so, I can't believe that person did that to you, Kelsey. Or is Pamela okay after that happened? Oh, and we always know it's a good episode because he'll text us and be like, oh my God.
I love that. So I actually got to be on your podcast and I absolutely love your podcast. It's
Thank
also
you.
in your title, Haunted Detective. But can you share a little bit how you got into the paranormal and true crime? I mean, I feel like it definitely shows in the work that you guys do.
Well, thank you. I grew up in a really haunted house and I've been able to, I see dead people my whole life. And that has led me kind of on an adventure of, I don't want to say like an adventure of discovery because that's so cheesy, but being able to see ghosts and having those abilities has really made me want to research stuff more and kind of find the truth. I'm also terrified of death and dying. So believing in ghosts and like reading about people's stories and experiences, it really helps me personally in my anxiety. But the true crime side, my grandmother was murdered and it was a cold case until 2022. It was a serial killer. I grew up thinking that she died in a car accident because she wasn't wearing her seatbelt, but that's not the case at all. My mom pulled me into a therapist's office when I was like 18, and her and my dad were like, well, your grandmother didn't die in a car accident, Kelsey. She was actually murdered. It's unsolved. We don't know who did it. Your grandfather was the number one suspect at the time.
Oh my God, my heart goes out to you because I can't imagine that, like discovering that, oh, I grew up a good portion of my life believing that this is what happened. And all of a sudden it's a lot more darker than what I thought it was. Did that shape or change anything regarding like how, because I know grieving, right? We go through a grieving process when someone passes. Did that change anything?
I never knew her.
Okay.
My mom was 9 when she died, but I mean, we were raised and my parents used it as a lesson, like, oh, always buckle in your seatbelt, always use your seatbelt, even though it was just like the furthest thing from the truth. So I
Mm.
don't really feel like I ever got to grieve because I didn't know her. But in a lot of ways, I'm grieving what I never had because I've never had a grandmother before.
Yeah.
And that grandmother position is kind of the person in the family that holds everything together. They're the glue. You know, your parents do something fucked up and the grandmother steps in and it's like, hey, don't do that to your kid. I would know. I was your parent. Or
Yeah.
like, hey, we all need to get together. We need to get the families together. And we didn't have that. So we're all pretty much estranged at this point.
Do you know, like, do you know a lot about the case, or how did this all happened?
Well, it's actually kind of crazy. So I was living in Austin working at Rooster Teeth, and my mom calls me and she's like, hey, they solved your grandmother's case. I can't give you any details because like it can't get to the media that this is happening. And I was like, oh shit. I just knew, I had a gut feeling. I was like, it was a serial killer. I was like, Mom, was it a serial killer? And she's like, I can't tell you. I can't do anything. And meanwhile, I'm clacking away on my keyboard, looking it up, serial killers in Long Island or unsolved cases in Long Island. And I found it. And I said to her, I was like, it was Richard Cottingham, wasn't it? And she goes, how the fuck did you figure that out, Kelsey? How did you know that? I was like, Mom, I researched true crime for a living. Did you expect I wouldn't figure it out?
Can you explain a little bit more about, like, for those people that don't know about who that is, like a little bit more about like what is the situation? How did he get caught?
So he was known as the New York Torso Killer, the Times Square Killer. And back in those days when he was murdering women in Times Square, this is after he murdered a bunch of women in Long Island. It was a very different place. Like Times Square was filled with crime and grime. And I like to call it Times Scare because it was just terrifying back then. And he got caught because one of his victims, he was trying to dismember them. He would dismember his victims, kill them. They were usually prostitutes because, to someone with such a great urge for killing, there's always that, okay, who is not going to be missed? This woman, Jessica Weiss, figured out that her mother was killed by Cottingham in Times Square. And so she was like, I want to know where her head is because he cut Jessica's mom's head off. And her body is buried in some mass grave for, unimportant victims, which is so fucked up to say, but she's buried in a mass grave. She wants to know where her head is, so she starts going to see Cottingham, and she befriends him and manipulates him and gets him to confess to all of these other cases.
I think that it goes into like the work that you do, right? I know that when we discussed off the podcast, you mentioned you have a very different take and viewpoint with true crime. Can you elaborate a little bit more on that?
Yeah, it was interesting because the feeling of it being a cold case versus the feeling of knowing a serial killer murdered her are two completely separate things. And, I went to the retrial, because he's in jail and has been in jail. I looked him in the eye while he was on Skype, which is weird to say that he retrialed on Skype. Anyways, it changed my perspective sitting down with all the other family members and them being like, I don't want to see this on social media yet. I don't want this. I don't want this detail. Like, they're okay with the case being covered, but a lot of them didn't want their family member to be remembered in that way. So if I cover a cold case or a case and, there are specific notes and articles from the family member, like, we want them to be remembered in ABC or this way, they were kind, they were generous, I always make sure to include that. But also, while understanding it's not our story to tell, while true crime does have its benefits, it does have its educational. Women love it because we're constantly scared of getting murdered. So it's kind of like a study point for us. How do we survive? How do we stay alive? How do we avoid these types of people? There's also still that aspect of it's not your story to tell. So I kind of approach it, if I'm telling a story of a serial killer, I'm going to talk about his past. I'm going to talk about the psychology, and I'm not going to get into gruesome details about what this person did to their victims. Because, a lot of these people, they shouldn't be remembered like that. They should be remembered as who they were.
Absolutely. I didn't realize the gravity of the situation until I was 18 years old. I was in college and I was like, what do I want to do with my life? And I had a book on Ted Bundy, right? Like, it was like all of these serial killers. And at the time I was like, not sure what type of like field I wanted to do. I was thinking about law, but not sure where. And so I was reading about Ted Bundy, and I left it on the kitchen countertop. And at the time I was staying with my mom's friend, a church friend of hers. And she came home and she saw the book and she's like, "Whose book is this?" I was like, "Oh, that's mine." And she's like, "My friend was killed by Ted Bundy." And I was like, "Oh, oh my God." And I immediately grabbed the book and I put it in my backpack. And I was like, "I am so sorry." And she's just like explaining the story and stuff like that. Because, so for context, my mom is Mormon and her church friend is Mormon. So they grew up in Utah. So they had a curfew and stuff like that. And I don't think this was covered in what I read or if it's been mentioned, but they had a curfew, so they had to walk in pairs. So people, like young girls, had to walk in pairs or with somebody if they were going to be walking home or something like that. So anyway, her and her friend are walking, and they lived like about a house or two away from each other. And her friend was like, "Oh, honestly, you don't need to walk me home." And the lady that I'm talking to, she's like, "Are you sure? Like, you know, I'd rather us just go to your house and wait for our parents to come pick us up." And she's like, "No, it's fine." So they went their separate ways. And in that split second, she was abducted by Ted Bundy. And yeah, the rest we already know. So it's just like I realized the gravity of that situation when here I am in someone's home on top of that, bringing in a book of a person that caused so much pain to her and the family, the victim's family. So yeah, I think true crime needs to be a lot more handled with care and
Yes.
sensitivity. Um, have you ever had any of the victims or victims' families reach out to you guys or comment on any of the videos you guys done?
There was actually one, it was, I covered it in 2021 and in 2023, or it was like a year or 2 years after I posted the video. The family member commented and was like, "You're pronouncing her name wrong." And she stitched the video and was really upset about it. And it was interesting to me that her first instinct was to get mad and get defensive. And that's not her fault. It's because people cover her family member's case and she'll make a correction or say something like, "Hey, this fact is incorrect." And she either gets blocked, her comment gets deleted. A lot of these creators, they don't respect the victim's family. And it's so obvious that this is what these people have to go through based on their reaction to a mistake. And
Yeah.
so I had messaged her and I was like, "I am so sorry. What do you want me to do? Do you want me to take the video down? Do you want me, like, how can I fix this?" And
Yeah.
so she asked me to take the video down. So I took it down and now we're mutuals on TikTok. And, she comments on my stuff every so often. I comment on her stuff. But there has to be a level of empathy, I
Hmm.
guess, that a lot of creators don't have. And I'm not going to name any specifically, but it's people like making a show of it. And I've heard of podcasters who invent details, make up details. There's a girl on TikTok who covered the Hello Kitty case and she invented these details that didn't actually happen. Oh, they fed part of her body to dogs and that never happened. And I'm like, why are you adding details onto a case where there was already such an immense amount of suffering? Why do you have to add more clickbait?
I think we live in a world where, like, yeah, we have information at the touch of our fingertips. But I think at this point, with social media being so saturated and so much accessibility, it's like people are trying to compete. And so they over sensationalize. Like, I think journalism and news has always had a level of sensationalism in the titles. Like, we can literally look at a title and be like, that's a crappy title. It's a lot more biased than what it used to be. And it's really hard to find something that's more neutral and a place where people just want to seek out information for whatever reason. Rather, it's more of like, I want the shock value at this point. Um, which then brings into the paranormal. The paranormal is very much like that too. I've touched base on the paranormal and when victims pass away, or it's getting covered by the news, or in this case, content creators, and then of course mediums want to get in on that hype, and then they start to quote channel. So I can see it also from that standpoint too, right? They're channeling quote unquote the victim, but they're adding nothing of value. They're not talking to the families that are involved in this. I think that's a different situation. There are families that do seek out mediums, and in that case, I think fine, but not when you're going to go online and try to be part of a trend or a hot topic. I think that's also very inappropriate. So anyway, no pun intended, but we're going to talk into a subject that hits close to home. So one weird connection that we have, other than many things, but is Colorado. Uh, I lived in Colorado for 10 years and I left 2 years ago. And you're currently in Colorado, right?
Yep. Uh-huh. That I am.
I think even your hat has like the little Colorado.
Oh my God. Right. This is from Telluride when I went in 2021 when you still lived in Colorado. Wait, were you in Colorado in 2021?
I left like Halloween night. We literally drove like Halloween day, started driving to California. Um, but yeah, so let's get into the strange phenomenon of Colorado because I love Colorado. I miss Colorado. But I'm also happy to be here in LA with my family. But Colorado's just strange. So there's a UFO tower in the San Luis Valley. If you ever get a chance, you have to go. There's also the infamous Stanley Hotel, which we know is the inspiration of The Shining, Stephen King's novel. And also there's the Cave of the Winds in Colorado Springs. So if you have ever go to Colorado, you have to go to Cave of the Winds. It's actually like a public tourist attraction where you can go in and see a cave with family and stuff like that. You don't need to be like a specialist to go into caves. And then they also have haunted roads. You and I talked about this, Riverdale Road. So I can literally go on. Like Colorado is just a very strange place, and I think it's underrated. I think it gets overshined sometimes by other states, and including the Stanley. I feel like everyone thinks, oh, a haunted hotel, it has to be the Stanley. I'm like, no, there's like so many other places that are just so underrated. Did you know about any of these?
Knew about the Stanley. We talked about Riverdale Road. I didn't know about the other ones, but what I'm hearing is that you're gonna come to Colorado and we're gonna go ghost hunting.
Yes. I really want to go back. But anyway, so the other thing about The Shining, though, I don't know if you knew this, they Dumb and Dumber was filmed there too, parts of it. The infamous staircase where Jim Carrey is fighting. Oh gosh, what's her name? I should know her name, but they're fighting down the staircase, and that infamous staircase scene is at the Stanley. So
What? Wait, I'm looking this up.
and one day, like, I hope Jim Carrey talks about this because there's no facts regarding this, but at the Stanley, they do mention this. Allegedly, Jim Carrey did spend the night there in one of the haunted rooms, and he like was like, "No, I don't want to stay here." I don't know what happened, but he literally booked a different hotel that night because he did not like whatever experience he had there. So that's what allegedly they say. Jim Carrey has never confirmed it.
Should we go stay in the same room that he did? Like, go up to the front desk and we're like, "Excuse me, we demand the room that Jim Carrey supposedly stayed in now. Yeah. Thank you."
Yeah, I mean, I think it's the infamous room 217 where like that's where like the most haunted room is. And that room gets booked out like 3-4 months in advance. Like I never got to stay in that room. I stayed at the not the main Stanley building, but the one next door to it. So, anyway, speaking of the strange phenomenon, I know that you also are very active, which Colorado is a wonderful state. It's literally like so many active people. Like I moved out here to LA and I'm like, I'm not as active and outdoorsy as I used to be, which makes me sad. But you've done hiking and stuff, right? Have you done solo hikes? Like, what's your experience with hiking?
So I'm an ultra marathoner. So the distances I used to train for are 50K plus. So anything greater than a marathon. And I definitely have experiences like there. I believe that every mountain, every trail, every wooded area, it all has its own energy. And there have been times where like I've had to do double days, meaning like you run in the morning and then you run in the evening. And when I lived in California, I would actually go up the mountain at night with my headlamp and go for a run. It's definitely very creepy being in a mountain on a mountain at night where there are no campers. I've had some weird experiences, but yeah, the mountains are my happy place. I love them.
I've done a lot of yeah, I used to do I don't know, people look at me like side eye when I say this, but I've done like solo day hikes as well. I'm not a mountain runner. Like I know Carl did it in Alaska, Mount Marathon. That's like one of the oldest marathons, and he was grandfathered in, and that's where unfortunately one of the people went missing on that mountain. It's like a very unsolved case out there, and he was there on that day. So there's just sometimes people have strange experiences. Luckily, knock on wood, where's wood? I've never experienced anything strange in my solo hikes or anything like that, but I've done campouts out in the Rocky Mountains. We've done all kinds of stuff out there the day before hiking. And so I'm going to share a story with you. So this is from the Reddit thread Colorado Off the Road. And the user is B_roll_off road. And they commented on a thread, but I found it really interesting. And I want to get your thoughts on this. And then we can dive a little more into the paranormal stuff. So this is what he said. I wanted to do the winding stairs. And for those of you that don't know Colorado, it's a hiking trail near Monument. So like heading towards Colorado Springs, south of Denver. Left around 8 p.m. I planned to camp as close to the beginning as possible and film the trail the following day. Despite being in my truck Ranger with the heat on, I got this really cold sensation when I drove onto the trail, and I decided to tackle a small obstacle at the start and set up my light on my camera. So I tested the light and I turned off my headlights, and simultaneously I tried to switch on my handheld light, but it didn't turn on. Then, standing in pitch darkness, I tried 3 times before it finally worked. I set up the shot and looked back at my truck, which is hard to describe because it looked very dead and desolate. It's almost like something out of a ghost movie. It had blue hues and steam and dust just swirling around it. It was seriously really weird. As I walked back to my truck, my camera light had turned off again, leaving me in pitch blackness. I decided to get out of there and ran back and grabbed my camera and got into the truck. When I reviewed the footage, the only shot I had was 1 second of my feet running back to the truck. There was nothing from the tripod. I shrugged it off, thinking I'd capture everything in the morning. So that's interesting because they were testing it. Oh, now you're having glitches. Wait, can you hear me? Oh no.
What the fuck?
Yeah.
It turned off my camera and then switched my audio to the camera.
Weird. Well, okay, that's no worries. I can turn off my camera too for right now to make it less awkward.
It's okay. I'm sorry.
No, you're good. Okay, so I'll keep reading it though, and if it does work later on, no worries.
He was gonna go check the tripod in the morning.
Oh yeah, there we go. Yeah, I reviewed the footage. The only shot I had was 1 second of my feet running back to the truck, nothing from the tripod. I shrugged it off, thinking I'd capture everything in the morning. While idling and searching for something in my truck with the dome light on, it suddenly turned off. That was the last straw. I immediately made a U-turn and went home. The next day, I was on YouTube looking for videos of the winding stairs trail and found a girl who had commented, quote, "beautiful area" on a video. When I clicked on her profile, I saw that she had only uploaded 4 videos, all of which were Eric Harris and Dylan, I forgot how to say his last name, so I apologize, Dylan Kelbod's, quote, home movies, where they were shooting in rampant range. The whole experience was weird as hell, and it spooked me big time. So for context, Eric and Dylan were the high school seniors and shooters of the Columbine High School massacre of April 20th, 1999. Eric and Dylan were the ones that killed 12 students, 1 teacher, and wounded 24 others. And after they had killed their victims, they decided to also self-inflict gunshot wounds. So interesting how this story just took a very creepy twist, right? Like very dark twist, where like the equipment is malfunctioning. This person is feeling very odd sensations. And then of course they so happen to stumble on a comment, not even like a comment. And then it took them to that. And at first I was like, those names sound familiar, but I don't know what that is. So I looked them up online, and I stumbled upon a website, and I just couldn't be on there for too long, but it was literally like screenshots of the rampant, of the home movies, quote unquote, where they're like practicing shooting and stuff like that. That made me feel very uneasy. But all of this to kind of summarize like how people can feel strange things in places, to your point. I'm a big proponent where the woods, locations, anything, especially the outdoors, have this strong energy to it. And so I don't know, what are your thoughts on that? Do you think it was supernatural? Like, what are your thoughts?
Well, wait, first of all, did Columbine happen in Colorado?
Yes. Mm-hmm. In
Littleton?
Yep.
That's where I live. Stop.
Yeah.
Oh my God. I had no idea. Anyways, I think that traumatic events leave a stain on an area. And so let me backtrack a second. Were those videos of them practicing shooting, was that at the spiral staircase where that guy was?
They were on YouTube looking for videos since they couldn't, they left the day of, and they found a girl who had commented beautiful area on a video. So I guess that comment striked this person. And basically when they looked at their profile, it was both of them just out there shooting stuff. So I don't know if it was at that location, but it's weird that that was the comment that they stumbled upon. I don't know.
Yeah. I don't know. I feel like I don't believe in coincidences personally.
I
So
don't
like the
either.
fact that they stumbled on that comment, it showed the Columbine shooters practicing. I don't know, maybe there's something to that, but also what he was experiencing in the woods that night, or what they were experiencing, it's that like sinking feeling like something's watching me, something's here. And I get that at night sometimes where I like go into the kitchen and I get water and then I just go, "Oh, something's there. Something's watching me." And then I just sprint as fast as I can back into my bedroom. It's such a horrific feeling to have, to be honest.
Yeah, it's weird. And like, so going back, like reading this, they said that that person that commented that video, or commented on that video of the winding stairs, this person only uploaded videos, 4 videos, all that were just Eric and Dylan doing their home movies of shooting,
That's
practicing
so
shooting.
weird.
Yeah. So I don't know what the connection is on that. Part of me is like, oh my God, this is going to take me down a rabbit hole. I don't believe in coincidences either. It's just really strange. Um, but like I said, I've never had any strange experiences hiking or camping. I know that it does happen. I know that there's like a lot of missing 401 cases throughout the United States, but definitely Colorado is a hub for it. Do you know much about any of these like weird, strange phenomenons of the missing 411
Oh my
cases?
god. Yeah, they're so creepy. We did a whole thing on that for season 2.
Oh, really?
And there was one story that really stuck with me where it was this little boy. He's out camping with his parents, and this is somewhere that his family used to go all the time. And so his parents just let him go off. He's picking berries or doing something, and suddenly his grandmother, who's not there, comes up to him, and magically she's just there, and she's like, "You need to come with me." And she takes his hand and takes him into this cave underneath the trail, and he describes seeing robots, like people who look like robots, but they're all out of battery and there's like cobwebs on them. And she pulls out a napkin and is like, "Hey, poop on this." And he goes, "No, I don't want to do that." And that's when he describes his grandmother as getting so angry that steam starts coming out of her head. But the thing that stuck with me the most with this is that several years earlier, the grandmother and the grandfather were camping there, and the grandmother felt a prick on the back of her neck like a needle, and she had pinprick blood coming out, like someone had stuck a needle in the back of her neck. So that's always been the one that when I think of missing 411, I'm like, okay, something else is happening here that we can't really explain.
Oh my God. Yeah, that's creepy. I think the ones with like the little kids like freak me out. There was another one. This is not based in Colorado, but the one that like it's not technically missing 411, but it's the one of Taylor Granger. I don't know if you've ever heard of that one. But it was in Vancouver area, I want to say. And this guy, he was really smart. He was like a genius. He knew how to like assemble things and disassemble things. Like he restored this old train that like just didn't work. And the town just knew him as somebody that just was very good at these things. And anyway, long story short though, he started really diving into his work. He even built like a tree house that was the shape of like a saucer, a flying saucer. And he said he was telepathically communicating with aliens.
Oh,
And yeah, and so he told his parents that he was going to go on like a 42-month voyage or something like that. And that he wouldn't be back for that long. And so he basically adjusted his will and scratched out death, I think, and wrote like, while he's leaving or like, while he's away. And he just disappeared. They never,
Oh my God.
one day he was at the diner the day of, and he had a friend of his that was like, "Can I go with you?" And he's like, "No, you can't come with me. They're very selective," or something like that. And then he sits at a diner, has his last meal, heads out, and they never found anything. However, what's weird is that they found later, a couple of years later, they found a piece of the side door, I believe. And they found, like, I think it was a t-shirt or something like that. I'm off the cusp, like improvising here. I was not planning on talking about this case, but I feel like it's very interesting.
Yeah.
So I don't have all the facts out there. So take what I'm saying with a very, very grain of salt, but it is real, like the timeline. And what I find weird is that they did call the police, they did collect all the stuff and try to sample it and do a whole thing on it. But apparently the items went missing. Like the bone went missing, or one of the bones that they found.
Oh.
And what I find weird is, like, from the vehicle, they think that it was a blast site, like a TNT blast site, because he did carry around TNT, and that's because, like, out there, since it's very woodsy, they would use it to like open pathways or remove blockages. And anyway, so what I find interesting is, like, okay, so out of all the things, a vehicle, right? No, a tire. We all know that the vehicles, like tires off a vehicle, those are hard to, like, they're not biodegradable. Those are things that are hard for us to even, like, in today's society, find a home for it.
Yeah.
And so you mean to tell me that out of all those things, you guys were only able to find a shirt that should be a lot more perishable than the side of a vehicle? You know what I mean? Like, it's so bizarre to me, like, how they didn't find anything else and somehow the bone goes missing. I don't know, that's strange.
That reminds me of the Solder children a little bit, because they were trying to convince George and Jenny Solder that the kids did die in the fire. And they were like, yeah, the fire was so hot that, it just cremated them. But here, look, we found a piece of a vertebrae, and they sent it to the Smithsonian. The Smithsonian was like, yeah, I don't know. Like, I don't think this is human. But there are so many cases like that where, they find a bone or they find remains, and then suddenly those remains are gone or they're not human. And my question always is, who put that there? If it's not human and it was staged to look like it belonged to the person who's missing, who put it there?
Yeah. Like, there's so many questions I have with these things, right? Like, it's just like, and I bet you anything, didn't it go missing, that piece too?
Yeah, the vertebrae, it did. I believe so.
Who the heck is, like, in charge of these, like, these items, and how do they go missing? Like, that's what I want to know. Like, I feel like, yes, it's a mystery that these items went missing, but, like, can we, like, stop? I don't know what's going on, like, where a lot of these cases are, like, somehow something goes missing that would be very key in solving something or reinforcing a conclusion. That's also another mystery. Like, how do we stop people from doing that? We don't, because there's something sus going on.
There have been so many cases where they've just lost whole ass body parts, like the Hinterkaifeck axe murders. They cut all the victims' heads off, gave them to psychics, and then the psychics lost their heads. So they're just forever without their heads. And I think that's horrible.
Oh my God. Oh, that is so messed up. What the heck? Well, speaking of psychic stuff and, like, paranormal stuff, right? Like, I mean, I know all of this, it has some weird elements to it, but I know that you mentioned that you've had some really crazy unexplained phenomenon. I should have asked this actually when the camera glitched out, but you have a very interesting doll that I channeled some things on. Can you talk about your paranormal experiences and also the haunted doll that I actually believe is causing some of this stuff to happen right now?
Probably is. So the haunted doll, I got her at an antique shop in Connecticut. I'm not going to say the name because I don't want this store getting flooded with people. Just
Fair.
that's why I never say it, because
Oh, I'm the same way.
freaking
I never tell people, like, where I got Johnny. I just say, oh, it's a used, like, toy shop comic book thing, like, because there's a lot of those in LA County. So
yeah, and there's also a lot of people who will go to these places and be like, I see a ghost, and then ruin it for everyone else.
Exactly.
It was an antique shop in Connecticut, and you walk in, it's in this guy's house, and you walk in, and it's just like a wall of energy. It just hits you, and it feels like walking face first into a brick wall and then being able to move through that brick wall. It's very startling. But I was on a live stream, and service kept cutting out in random parts of the house, and I'm talking to the owner of this store. Let's call him Bob, right? Give him a fake name. And I was telling him, I was like, hey, is this place haunted? And he goes, oh, Lorraine Warren actually came here once. And because, she was a family friend and she always said that it was. But the ghost is really nice. We're actually friends. And I was like, oh, I'm not feeling a nice spirit, but okay, I go off, I guess. And he's telling me that they're having construction on their kitchen and they can't hold down a construction crew because things happen and they'll just sprint out and leave in the middle of the day and then call them and be like, we're not doing this. It's not happening here. And he was also telling me when he was a kid, he used to hear almost like a battalion of soldiers and horses, like people on horses, just parading through the downstairs. And he'd go down there and check it out, and obviously no one was there. But all of this to say that the shop was haunted. And so he's following me around everywhere I go talking about ghosts, and he's just weird. There's something off about him, and I can't put my finger on it because it almost seems like he has almost like two energy fields. And yeah. I've never experienced that before in my life. I'm not someone who believes in possession. I never believed in spirit influence or whatever. But I never really thought about if you let a spirit influence you and you invite it in and you do all this stuff, is that possible? I don't know. All I can tell you is that he had two different energy fields. One of them was very human, very, here are your auras, here are your colors, whatever. And the other one was very dark and like inky black. And I did not like it. So he's following me around and I keep getting these weird images in my head of like him sneaking up behind me and like putting a needle in my neck. And I couldn't shake the feeling that something was very off. And I'm on live stream the whole time. And finally he comes up to me and he goes, do you want to come up to the attic? It's the most haunted part of the house. And I was like, what the fuck? Is there like, is there candy up there? Do you have a hurt puppy? Do you need help getting your wheel? Like, what is this? And of course, 100 people on my live stream are all blowing up the comments and they're like, go to the attic, go to the attic. I'm like, there's no way, guys. There's no way I'm going up to this attic right now. But finally, I find 3 things that I want to buy because they all have spiritual attachments or energy. And I'm like, I need to get these out of here because there's something just so off about this man and about this house. So I left. I took money out of a ATM because he was going to give me $100 off if I paid in cash. And I go back in because I'm an idiot, of course, with no self-preservation. And his wife is there. So now at this point, I'm trying to buy this stuff and I had to go. I had lunch with someone in 10 minutes. That was 15 minutes away. And he's on one side, like in front of me, and she's behind me. And I have to turn my back to one, to the other, to make eye contact with them, to have a conversation. And I was so skeeved out. I just had such a bad feeling. I got out of there as fast as I could. And he's like, do you want me to help you bring the stuff you bought to the car? It was 3 things. It was a doll, a top hat that was foldable, and a book. I was like, no, I'm good.
Weird.
Yeah, so I bring the doll back and weird stuff starts happening almost immediately. And I've always had this thing where I can touch an object and see a dark past surrounding it. Like I had this printing press stamp for, I think it must have been for a children's book. It has a rocking horse on it. And every time I touched it, I would see this little boy in the snow, like getting thrown out of a house in the snow, and he's holding onto the stamp. So that's something I've always been able to do, not on purpose, but, and it doesn't happen every time, but I kept seeing this image every time I touched the doll of this little girl in a wooden wheelchair with kind of wicker type backings and arms, whatever. And she falls out of the wheelchair and she dies. And then someone makes the doll over her body, and it's an older woman. And I just got this very strong gut feeling, oh, this doll was made as a vessel to put that spirit inside because her family wasn't ready to let her go.
Oh no, that makes me sad.
I know. So at that point, what I learned from this doll is that if you create an object to like trap an energy or a spirit in it, it's going to attract other energies and other spirits. So weird things started happening, and it was like it's like a reverse Annabelle. You don't want the spirit to leave the doll, sort of thing. Like the other ones that are in there, I don't know. I'm not an expert. You're an expert, Steffany. So correct me if I'm wrong about any of this. But basically, I started doing spirit box sessions with her. I was using Phasmabox on my gaming laptop, and I'm sitting with a doll, I'm holding her, and this is on a live stream. And the same people that were at the antique shop with me on the live stream are now watching me do the spirit box session. And suddenly a voice comes through, and of course I'm changing the antique owner's name still to Bob, and it comes through and it goes, Bob, the name's Bob, you want to make a deal, or whatever it said.
Oh God.
Hey, it's Bob, you want to make a deal. And for those of you who don't know, when you're live streaming, chat is always delayed by like 30 seconds to 60 seconds. And so I say out loud, oh my God, that sounded exactly like the antique shop owner. At the same time, everyone who was in both live streams comments and goes, isn't that what the antique shop owner sounded like? Isn't that his name? And so it was just the most bizarre fucking thing ever.
That is really strange. Okay, I have a couple of thoughts, but I don't want to like. I'll let you finish.
Oh, no, that's it. I'm done. There have been other weird
Okay.
things. Like I have a video of my LED light stand falling off of my desk when I told her to throw something because she opened the drawer by herself. So yeah, but that's really it.
Okay, cool. No, first of all, like, yeah, that's such a odd situation to be in with this person. I know you mentioned you don't really believe in possessions, but one thing that I'm also very skeptical of possessions myself. One of the things I've learned over the years, I've actually met somebody that they felt like they were on one of the last stages before possession. So he actually talks about how there's these levels of possession and there's just all these different things that will happen. Um and it's fascinating to me because I think, you know, when you watch movies, especially The Exorcist, and it's funny that you mentioned Lorraine Warren because I don't know about you, but a lot of the stories regarding her, like, I feel is they were kind of like sensationalist and fear-mongering people. I do believe
Yeah.
that about Ed and Lorraine Warren. But it's interesting though, because I don't think that like everything that they dealt with is made up. I just think that they were sensationalist and fear mongers, if that makes sense. Um, but with that being said, I think that I've met somebody who talked about the level of possessions, and I think that I'm not saying that this person is getting possessed. I'm wondering though if there were dabbling in certain things that would hit those symptoms, even though I'm not for certain what all of the symptoms are. So part of me feels like this person, and I don't know, like I feel like they have dabbled into some form of the occults or like maybe are doing some type of binding or ritual things that maybe that's what you were sensing. Um and maybe that's what it is too, like you're sensing that they might have had not an I hate to use the word attachment because I feel like that's such a fear-based key, you know, hot term. But part of me feels like there might have been something there, you know, like with
Yeah,
him. Um,
absolutely.
especially if he's dabbling into that or he's around objects that have been binded into a vessel. It gives me the like just you even mentioning it, I'm like, oh, this give me the heebie-jeebies.
The thing that got me the most with him was that he said the ghost was his friend and the ghost was really friendly. And I was like, I'm not like I'm feeling a protectiveness almost and like a darkness. That's so dramatic. I'm sorry. But when he said the ghost is friendly, we're friends, I was like, okay, that explains it. Something weird is going on here.
Yeah, I don't know. I just feel like yeah, there's probably other things that he's doing, not even like in regards to owning like an antique store, but the way that I got was like vibes of other things too. I recently had a close friend of mine who I when I first met her, I said, "Do you like do you have like a like I'm not trying to be mean. I was like, but do you have like a spirits like that you work with that you have allowed to attach themselves to you? And she's like, oh no. And then later on, she ended up doing like a Reiki cleansing, and this person said, you have something attached to you. Um, a full year later,
Oh my god.
after I said that, and I think like apparently their magic. They did a ritual, like a really high intense, like ritualistic magic spellcraft type of stuff, and they never finished it. So it just kind of like manifested it on its own and it was attached to her. And that's what I was sensing because I'm like, it's not human, but it's there. And I felt it. And then like
Yeah.
fast forward, it took somebody to be like, like a healer and really like reinforce, like, no, you have an attachment. So that's what I'm saying, like to you. I wonder if this guy was doing like other things that's what you were sensing too.
It's possible. I mean, I don't even want to think about what's in the attic. Like,
Yeah.
what is up there?
So fair. That's so fair. And then the other thing too, you mentioned that you sense things with when you touch an object, you can get premonitions, you can sense things. So that's
Yeah.
psychometry. That's how I psychometry. So it's the ability to like obtain impressions or get visions through the object. Like you can see the past or like events associated with it. So, one of my favorite techniques that I do in my psychic development is a form of psychometry. So, we do this little exercise where we write an open ended question or a subject on a piece of paper and we put in an envelope and we give it to somebody who does not know what you wrote. And
Oh.
yeah, and the person receiving it, they hold the envelope or the piece of paper and they channel the energy from it. And a lot of the times, that's like they are able to pick up thematic things or answers to what's in the piece of paper without reading it. I think that's my favorite technique to use on people too that are like, I'm not intuitive. I have nothing. I have no abilities. I'm like, are you sure? Let's try this. And then they do. And then they're like, oh my God, I wowed myself. I'm like, yeah, see, like it's just a really nice, I feel it's one of my favorites.
Yeah, it used to creep me out because I didn't understand what the fuck was happening to me.
Fair. Okay, so this your story with how you got the doll and stuff like that. But since then, has there been any strange occurrences in your home or like what else has happened?
Okay, so I started taking edibles at night, and I don't know if do you take edibles or smoke weed at all or do any of that stuff?
I am literally like the most sober person ever.
Okay, so I only started doing it for my insomnia. It really helped. But basically, every time I take edibles, I feel like my third eye opens a lot more. Last night specifically, I was high as shit. I don't know how I got that high, but it was an accident. And I walked out into my kitchen. This is kind of what I briefly touched on before, but every time I do this and I like have taken an edible, I always feel like someone's watching me, not in like a, oh, the weed's making me paranoid, but like no, my senses are tingling, my spidey senses are going off. Something's watching me.
Yeah.
So last night I like looked over and I kind of saw like a figure and I go, "Up, my room's a safe zone." And I sprinted back into my room.
Oh my goodness.
Safe zone. Safe zone. Help me.
So wait, do you never so you feel things more in the living room rather than your bedroom?
Yeah, I think I like accidentally might have put wards up in my bedroom or something or set a boundary because it stuff used to happen in my bedroom, but it doesn't anymore in this apartment specifically. But also the woman that lives directly under me. I don't know if it's on the first floor or second floor, but she lives under me. She always burns Palo Santos, and the smell and the smoke comes right up through the vents and comes specifically into the master bathroom and bedroom.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, very active. I felt it very active because I remember when, we were first when we first around the first time we were like we met through that Zoom chat And we saw the doll and everything like that. Even just seeing the image of it, I was like, oh, this is a very active item that you have. So
It
um
scares me. It scares me all the time. Like when I was live streaming and it just did the thumbs up by itself. I was like, that's too perfect. This can't
right.
be real. That's too perfect.
Yeah, like, and actually I'm going through like our messaging because I was like, okay, so just like a refresher what I was saying, picked up on some things, and then I also did like a tarot session, and I picked up that like the doll comes from some type of like either the maker or it has some type of lineage to Europe, particularly France. I don't know, but that was something that I was picking up with it. And then like it wasn't really happy with modifications. So I guess like someone did modifications on the doll that they were not very happy with for some reason. And I think too, like going back to how you said that you feel like it wasn't it that the family binded the spirit to the doll, right? So I can
I
see
think
that
so.
if that is true, I can see why they would feel a certain way about that. Like, oh, I'm binded to this, so I'm not happy with this in particular. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Um, and then that like I got like it was a 12-year-old girl or something like that. But then of course, like I did say that there are other things I've tried to touch it or like other things I've tried to mess with it. And then now you're telling me what you're telling me. I'm like, oh yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
It's creepy. I mean, I no offense. No offense. She scares me a little bit. There used to be a really negative spirit inside of her that I had to get help to like cleanse, I guess. And I would be doing the spirit box sessions with her and I'd pick the doll up and this deep voice would come through and be like, put her down.
Oh
And
my
so
god.
I just started keeping her in a drawer that I saged, and nothing happened when I did that, but now she's out and she's free, she can look around, she can sit on this shelf, and now things are starting to happen again, so help.
Well, fun fact, so sage, I know sage people, and like I don't blame people for this, but I touched base on it on the video that I did when I did my Ouija board cleansing, that there are a couple things that you want to do to you basically like set the intention and ward off and prevent things. So like I'll go quickly over like the stages. So the first stage is either having like Florida water or like holy water, blessed water, and you want to like sprinkle that throughout your home or like the space that you're going to be having the doll in. And then the second thing is smoking out the doll, but I always say smoking out because sage, well, sage is a good tool. One of my friends, Sean Clen, he actually did a great video on this about how people are using sage incorrectly, and he's a Navajo person. So, but the thing is that when we use herbs, right, to smoke things out, I think we need to look at the distinctions, right? There's banishing and there's warding off. Sage
Mhm.
falls into warding off. It doesn't banish things. So, you want to first banish it with like rosemary. That's something that they have used historically in like in exorcisms. It's a really good herb that you can use. Cedar is also another one. It's something that people put in their homes to banish and ward off things. It's also local and common in a lot of areas. So that's something I always suggest. And then I suggest the saging or another like Palo Santo or something else like lavender or things of that nature. And that's what I do personally, or frankincense. That's another good one too. I have a lot of frankincense incense. um, and then from there, you want to seal it off with like a prayer and all of that fun stuff. So that's how I do it. So maybe, but it sounds to me that you guys did something already. It's just that it's if it's active again, that would be my recommendation.
Yeah, I was mostly using the sage as a wording. This was also, I should mention, in 2022, I think, the end of 2021 to the beginning of 2022. So this was before I knew about everything going on with sage and people abusing it. And now I don't use sage anymore because it's such a gray area, and I'd
Yeah.
rather respect indigenous people and their culture, even if I was doing it right as a non-indigenous person, whatever it may be. So I just avoid it. But I was more trying to ward her in there and
Fair.
like keep it there. But yeah, things are happening, and I've found that, and correct me if I'm wrong, when something is made as a vessel, it attracts other things into it and they get trapped inside or trapped as an attachment. And so I feel like things kind of just vacuum into her.
Yeah, like it really just depends too on the type of spirit is also my guess. From my understanding is in general, like spirits that bounce in and out, that already lets me know that there was something like when they binded it, they probably opened up. I don't want to say portal because that's just such a cliche term and it can mean so many different things. But I'm just going to use the term portal for this situation. Like it almost feels like in general, and I want to actually say this is my hot take. I think a lot of haunted items can be that because it's already an imprint where like you're bouncing in and out. It travels a lot, especially haunted dolls have probably traveled in so many stores and near other things that it just automatically creates like a doorway or a pathway. Um so yeah, I think in some aspects, yeah, I feel like so many things. And if you're mentioning that antique store, there was a lot of other things too that probably like, oh, this was they use this to like imprint something. Let me try to touch it, or let me see if I can also like, you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
jump on that. So yeah, to some aspects, yes, I feel like for certain. I think though, there's also cultures like Santeria as an example where they use this terminology where they birth the spirit into the doll, and they do a whole ritual with it. So it's only that spirit on that doll. And usually it's like an ancestor or somebody that agrees to help that person with their practice. Um, and so it's a very interesting take. So I think like in some aspects, yes, but I think in other practice, it just depends on the ritual, I would say, and the intention as well.
Yeah, I honestly maybe we should do a live stream where we both try to read the doll one day.
Yeah, I would love that. Whenever I use paranormal equipment, that's why I always cleanse my equipment because I know so many spirits have touched it. So like I will always do like a banishing and cleansing. So whatever is remains there, it's like I do another cleanse. And most people, paranormal investigators, don't believe in that or they don't do that. And then they wonder why some things come through or don't come through. That's just a little fun little tip I wanted to add.
Yeah, I've definitely made the mistake of not cleansing my stuff and have definitely gotten some hitchhikers through that. But I feel like a lot of spirits are smart. I feel like they know, oh, that person, they they see me. I've been stuck in this one room for like 100 years. I'm just gonna, Velcro onto her and go see the world now.
Yes. Oh, yeah, no, absolutely. I think for sure, like they'll pick up very easily on who are the people that really want to talk to them or don't want to talk to them. Because I'm not going to show myself to you either. Like it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work. I'm not going to do that to you. You're just going to debunk it. So I don't care. I'm going to go to someone else who's going to believe me.
So I had mentioned to you that I have a 411 story. I don't really think it's 411, but I do have a really weird story and I want to hear your opinion on it because I think that this is truly interesting and I've never talked about this story on a podcast before.
Oh, well, let's hear it. Let's hear. I'm excited.
Okay, so this is from my dad's perspective. When me and my sister were kids, we grew up in New York. There was acres and acres of woods behind our house. And, in later years, going into those woods, I found an abandoned cabin and, some other stuff. And the woods behind my parents' house, it has a weird energy. And I think part of that comes from a hunting club that's pretty nearby, but it's a very private, exclusive club. But I feel like that sort of I'm going out there and I'm killing things in bulk, in mass, sort of creates a weird dark energy. But my sister were young. I think I was like 3 or 4. My dad is watching us from the kitchen window, play in the backyard by the woods. And suddenly, this man, this hunter, just walks out of the woods, blank stare, just makes a beeline towards me and my sister. And my dad comes sprinting outside. He's like, "Hey, what are you doing?" And he looks up at my dad, turns on his heels, and walks back into the woods and just disappears. Like, we went to all the local hunters and were like, "Hey, have you seen this guy?" Or not we, my parents did. No one knew who he was. No one saw him again. And it was just bizarre. I was like, God damn, did I almost go missing? Did I almost get kidnapped as a kid?
Oh my God, that's so creepy. Like I'm almost curious, like the way I envisioned that, like you were saying all this and I was like visually playing it in my mind and it almost felt like, do you know if he had a blank look on his face? Like was it very robotic movement or anything like that?
From the way my dad describes it, yes.
Oh, ew. And he said that they were a hunter, right? Like they were dressed up in like hunting gear.
Yeah.
Oh gosh. Yeah, that's so bizarre to me because it makes me think of a good friend of mine, Brittany. She shared the story about like because she lives in Toronto, and when she was a kid, they saw these two men that were very robotic in their movements, but it's almost like the Men in Black. You know how they say that they're very robotic and expressionless?
Yeah.
So I'm not saying that the guy that you experience is the Men in Black, but it the way that you're saying like, okay, they're literally walking very weird and robotic, and then they just beeline towards you guys. And it, like Brittany was telling me that the men that she saw, they walked very weird and unison, and then they were asking her if they saw her and her friends in the woods, asking if they saw a beaver,
Oh.
and she's like, no. And anyway, point of the matter is that they started like really fast running through like the water or like supposedly looking for this beaver. And it's weird to me because obviously she paints it as like this is like a Men in Black thing, but you're painting it as like, no, this weird guy just like came out of the woods, came for me and my sister. Had my dad not been there, who knows what would have happened. And I'm almost curious, like, this is now just conspiracy. Just like literally take this with a grain of salt. But like, you know how they say there's like the Men in Black, and like how they walk weird, but I wonder if there's other weird humanoids that are not the Men in Black, but have very similar
Mm.
symptoms that maybe go after children. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I don't know.
That's interesting. That makes me think of Dudleytown, that cursed town in Connecticut, where God forbid you even mention the name on the TikTok or Instagram Reels, people will come and be like, "Leave our town alone. Don't talk about Dudleytown," even though it's completely abandoned. There are some stone walls, some fireplaces standing, but there's something called the Dark Forest Entry Association where it was created to keep people from going into Dudleytown, and it's hidden under the guise, oh, we don't want any people graffitiing the runes or whatever. But the thing about the East Coast is that there are runes everywhere and no one gives a fuck. But to call it the Dark Forest Entry Association, I think that's close enough to what it's called. That's creepy. What are they protecting people from?
Yeah. That is really weird. There's actually this show on Netflix called Bodegin. I watched the first episode recently, and it's about this true crime podcasters. They go to this town, a small town in I think Ireland, and they act very weird about this case. The guy's trying to figure out a case, and the people in the town are acting really weird about it. So yeah, it almost feels like they're covering something. I don't know. That's what I think.
Mhm.
They have to be covering up something. Um, but oh yeah, sorry, one more last note on the thing of like the weird guy, the hunter. Even though I did say the conspiracy aspect, I'm also very open and like just for people listening, like I'm not being like QAnon conspiracy, but I want to also add
Not
like
that conspiracy,
yeah,
guys.
not that conspiracy, but I want to also add like I'm also very open and lean into the side that maybe this guy was like a child abductor.
Yeah.
I don't know, like, because sometimes there are really weird people out there, and maybe he just turned off his humanity and was trying to abduct you guys. We're over at an hour, so I don't want to keep you too long. But this was so much fun. I really appreciate you giving your insight. And before we wrap up today's episode, can you let people know where they can find you?
Yeah, so I'm pretty much on every social media platform. If you want the good stuff, then go to Instagram, haunted.detective, or TikTok, haunted_detective. But if you want to see some more personal things, I also have a page called The Kelsey Childs. But other than that, our podcast is on every streaming platform, even ones that I didn't know existed. And I swear the list is so long. I was like, it's like Podbean, Pod Vanilla, Watching Pod. I'm like, what is this is a thing? Yeah, we're working on getting stuff up on YouTube. So hold your breath. Wait, we're getting there. But yeah, thank you so much for having me on, Steffany. This was a lot of fun.
Yeah, thank you for being part of this. So thank you so much for that, Kelsey. So remember, you guys, stay strange.
Stay strange. Do it.